Welcome back to Behind the Songs. This is the series where we speak with recording artists, songwriters, and record producers and discuss the art and craft behind some of our favorite music. I'm your host, Mark Conklin, and today I'm very happy to be joined by 2019 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductees from the legendary band Def Leppard, Joe Elliot, and Phil Collen. Their newest album, set for release on May 19th, with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. Yes, I really did say that. It's called Drastic Symphonies, and it features some of their greatest hits reimagined, and we're going to discuss some of those hits today. Gentlemen, welcome to Behind the Songs. It's so good to have you on.
Thank you. Good to be here.
First, just to overall talk about the album a little bit. This is not what sometimes you might imagine, where you just take songs and throw an orchestra on top of it and make it sound bigger. These are very much reimagined. I had a chance to spend time with it. Things are taken out that you're not expecting and added in different arrangements, etc. Could you talk a little bit just overall about the album, about how this came to be, and how you decided your approach, what it was going to be when you decided you were going to do it, but you were going to do it this way?
Well, we're very protective over our stuff, and not just as artists, but us especially. We took years before we allowed downloads. And it had a massive effect when that actually really happened. So we're really precious and protective over our songs. Hence, we go in the studio. We sometimes spent 3 years recording some of these things. So we really didn't want someone else taking the reins and doing their stuff to our art, if you want to put it a better way. So we didn't. We said we'd be involved, but we want to be totally involved. We want to be immersed into it. We want to get our own arranger in, our string arranger. We want to feature the most amazing, orchestra out there, the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. And so that would require us redoing some things, taking some things out, so it worked in context. We did that. Joe done some amazing vocals. The original one, when we took, say, the drums and the bass and stuff out, it was out of context, so we had to go in and do more stuff. So we done, the whole process was like that. It was like a brand new album using some of our classic stuff. So it's pretty unique, actually.
And where was it recorded? Where was the orchestra recorded? And were you there for a lot of that, or how did that process unfold?
We were there for the whole process when they were recording, and they recorded at Abbey Road, famous for where that band recorded a lot of their work, and Pink Floyd. Yeah, we were very fortunate because we did all our side of the work remotely while we were still in lockdown, as a continuum of Diamond Star Halos. Really, we got that album in the bag, and it's like, well, what else can we do to take over in 2021? And when this idea was put in front of us, as Phil says, as long as it wasn't just them shoving icing on an already made cake, we were happy to get involved. We wanted to really tear these songs apart and piece them back together. And some of them we didn't, because they didn't need it, but a lot of them we did. And then once we got our parts done, it was a case of bringing the orchestra, taking the tapes to Abbey Road, and we'd stand up on the balcony, and they were in the big Studio One, the big one, and we were watching them do their thing. And it was absolutely incredible to watch, because these are real musicians. They can read. So consequently, whereas we're like a field band where we sit around and we practice, and when people say we're good, it's because we've hammered it out 1,000,000 times. These guys just read it like a newsreader, but they read feel as well. And I don't think they did more than 2 or 3 takes of every song. And to our untrained ears, take one was no worse than take 2 or 3. Right. In fact, half the time we're up on the balcony, because they're all wearing headphones and we're just here in the orchestra. We're trying to figure out what song they're playing, because we don't hear the intros because there's no speakers, So it was kind of fun to watch them do that. But it was incredible to hear them, because even up there on the balcony looking down, the balances were absolutely bang on. I don't know what it is about orchestras, but you think that maybe some instruments that are kind of quiet need to be at the front and loud ones at the back. It really wasn't like, well, we weren't studying anywhere you went. It sounded like the same, And of course, we had the luxury that most people don't get, is once they'd got a few takes done and we might take a lunch break, we'd actually went down in the control room and had roughs back of the band and the orchestra to the big Abbey Road speakers, and it was mind blowing. It really was.
There was no like deal. Yeah, the cello player moved to the front a bit, you know.
Yeah.
But we did have to, like, you know, we'd sneak around because they're the recording, and we got our phones. It's like, drop your phone. It's like, you know, you're a pin drop in there. So it was amazing. But like Joe said, it was mind blowing, the whole experience.
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing this for 46 years, yet we were still sneaking out to the balcony and letting the door slam behind us. And you're like, ah, God. You know? And then all look up. He's like, damn it, you know.
Right. And they're recording that, you know, with the big room mics, right? Like catching all of that at the same time, which is yeah, it's amazing. And it's funny that the first song that you released from that, Animal, that's one, again, there's a good example. Like you wouldn't know, right, if you took the vocal out necessarily what you're listening to. When it's together, then you're like, oh my gosh, like I would never. That's what I meant when I said like it was really reimagined. That is not just putting an orchestra on top of something. It's almost a completely different song with the same lyric and melody, obviously. But tell us a little bit about that song, how that, you know, originally when you guys first wrote it, kind of where it came from, but also how it, you know, your take on how it evolved in this iteration here.
The irony of that particular song is that I remember we was in Dublin writing the Hysteria album with Mutt Lange, producer and co-songwriter and everything, you know. And we had a version of it. We recorded it for the Hysteria album. Joe done a lead vocal in a studio in Paris, and Mutt Lange went, I think we should throw the backing track away and keep the lead vocal. So it's ironic that you mentioned that, because we did. We actually, it sounded kind of a bit dated already, and so we changed the whole backing, but just kept this great vocal that Joe had done. So when it comes to doing this, it was kind of easy to take all the instruments out, like especially the guitars, the bass, and that in the verses, and just hear this vocal, because that was the thing that kind of drove the whole song. It was and not just the vocal, the vocal performance. So you know, we did this, and when we started adding things back into it, it really worked. So again, the orchestra was really featured on this, because a lot of the other instruments were like just taken out. But we'd done it once before, so this is third time's a charm, I guess, you know, with that one.
What do you remember, Joe, about that vocal when you first did it? Did you know it was a? I mean, do you know as a singer when you've hit it, or do you have to live with it for a while? Like for you, your process, how do you know when it's right?
It's a song by song basis, really. Some songs you just can't get your head around them, and then eventually they click. Something, I don't know whether it was something in the water in Paris. We were only in Paris for a little while, and then it's like it didn't work. But what we got out of Paris was that vocal, which was done really, compared to everything else on the record, done very quickly. And I don't know, my voice was just in a certain shape at that particular summer of '85. I think we were there when Live Aid was on, and it was there when it was like Bastille Day and all that kind of stuff. So we got to see a lot of cool stuff. Like we saw the Live Aid gig that we couldn't do, but we also got to see all the military kind of parades and all this mad stuff, and you know, did the tourist thing on the Champs-Elysees, and then went to work. You know, and I was just really lucky. We wrote the lyrics in Dublin. The lyrics were all written, melody didn't really change. But as Phil says, the backing track just that I sang it to just didn't really have that zing that the version that everybody's aware of still has in my ears. But the vocal worked, and as Phil says, when we got the tapes back to Holland, I think we went, because we were literally moving all over the place on that record. We got the tapes back to Holland, and they just started messing with it and stuff. And he was like, you know what? I'm just going to leave the drums on and leave the vocal up, and you guys and me, as in Mutt, we're going to just work this out and put something around the vocal. So it was that song is a classic example. Is if you've got a melody, it's going to work, because that is the thing that people will whistle in the shower, sing on their way to work, we were very fortunate that second time around, because the vocal was driving that whole process, these guys came up with a fantastic backing track. But the vocal was it was a relatively easy write. I don't remember it being a great struggle to be written, and for once in my life it wasn't a great struggle to sing. It was normally the backing track comes easy and the vocals are a pain, but it was on that one, it was, I don't know, it was the stars were just aligned differently, and it just worked a treat.
There's some people who believe that, or will say that if they write something great, they write it very fast, or it may take, a lot of iterations and they have a lot of rewrites and things like that. It's the stuff in between that they find ends up not being that great. For you guys, your process, have you found anything correlations there, things that either you work fast or things you really struggle with, whether they're good or bad or end up being successful or not? Have you found any kind of connection there?
It's different always, but you get so inspired. It's usually if the chorus comes first, it kind of sets the what the story's about, So the lyrics come first verse, great, get to the second verse, and it's like, and it always slows down lyrically. I'm talking about. Musically, it's usually a bit easier, regardless. For me anyway. I mean, it's different. Everyone you ask, they'll have a different answer. But I could just keep adding musical things constantly. I could put new sections in. I could add stuff to the section that already exists. It's lyrically, for me, I find it difficult. You want to narrate something, you want it to be cool, you want people to be able to approach it and everything, but you don't want to confuse them as well. So there's a fine line. You don't want it to be throwaway either. So for me personally, always a second or third, if you ever get to a third verse, is struggle lyrically. It's just you want it. If the first one comes so easy or easier, and then you're kind of just filling in the blanks for the second one. So that generally happens.
It's a good point, actually, because I can remember we having the conversation about lyric writing way back in the probably early 90s, and Phil saying it's strange when you listen to a lot of songs how the second verse is always a bit of a lyrical letdown. And then we would point and poke at certain songs and go, but then there's American Pie, where the 16th verse is as good as the first.
Yeah.
There's always an odd exception to the rule. But I've always kept that on board whenever I'm writing lyrics. On Diamond Star Halos, Phil would call me up when it would be literally like this: 7 o'clock his time, 3 o'clock mine, or whatever. And he'd say, "I've got this idea. I've got a chorus," and he'd send it over to me, and I go, "Okay, cool. You want me to do it?" And he's like, "Fine." So I'm listening to say like "Lifeless" off Diamond Star Halos, and once I heard the chorus, I went, "Okay, I know where we're going with this." And I had to go at doing some verses, but I always have it in the back of my mind: don't let the second verse suck, because it's just something for 30 years that it's been like. It's like when somebody tells you, one of these like guru people says some phrase that you'll take with you to your grave. It was one of those things of like, let's make sure that the second verse is as strong as the first. And literally sometimes I've actually put them there when I'll just put the second verse first. Because it's so abstract, it doesn't make any difference. But this one's certainly better than that. But most of the time, it's just being aware that it's like, the great lyric writers of the world, which is, generally speaking, and be your Bob Dylans and Bono, and then occasionally one guy gets it right once. With the greatest of respect to Don McLean's career, it was the pinnacle of it. And, Horse with No Name by America. There's always one song that you can go, wow, the lyrics are insane, but they don't really ever follow it up, So we're always aware of the fact that we may never follow it up either, but at least give it a go. Don't rest on your laurels. Always be aware that coattail ride on the genius of or stand on the shoulders of giants, And if you get stuck, just go. I literally will sit there sometimes. I'll go, what Bono would do here? What would Bob Dylan do? What would Springsteen, Ian Hunter, all the great Bowie, what the great lyricists, what would they do? And you go, well, Bowie just get bits of paper, cut them up, and throw in the air.
Right.
And that's not going to work. So you just, I've found, especially with Diamond Star Halos, because we were doing it on the fly, and it had a natural energy because we were in lockdown and we were literally doing this, but actually not even Zoom. We were just on the phone. That you could just walk away from it, and then take your kids into the garden, because there was nothing else to do, or put the hazmat suit on and go to the local store for your weekly groceries, and then come back and go, Eureka. Then you see it's glowing at you. You've got a book of words or phrases, and the one you want starts to just leap off the page, and you go, okay, that's the one I was. You couldn't see it. You couldn't see the wood for the trees, you know. And then an hour and a half later or a day later, you fill in the blank. So I think if you're trying to do the brick building thing where you start at 9 and you have to have a song finished at 5, it's your art's going to suffer, because then you're just a carpenter. All you're doing is building stuff without any feel. I think, you know, walk away for 2 days, come back, and if you get something that you can go, Phil, I'm sending you some lyrics through, they've got to read as well as they sound. That's how we didn't used to think that way, but we do nowadays. It's like if we haven't got the nerve to print the lyrics on the inner sleeve of the album cover, they're obviously not worth reading. So, you know, we were very optimistic on the last 2 records that lyrically we've turned a corner and we've reached a certain way of doing it that we can look each other in the eye and go, you just wrote a really good lyric there, Phil. And I'm proud and happy to sing it, you know, because I might not understand what the hell you're talking about, but it sounds great, you know. And
yeah, me too. I no clue.
you know, I mean, that's the way it is. I kind of tend to write more like a narrative, I suppose, like on things like Angels off the last album. I almost wrote it like a detective talking about following some theme of a story through the newspapers. It wasn't really anything to do with that. It was just a loose thread of something I could hang phrases on about, you know, burying the truth on page 33 and stuff like that. It was just, you know, I could see Humphrey Bogart kind of saying that, you know, in a film noir movie. And Sav, the same thing when he wrote From Here to Eternity. It was a murder ballad, you know, and then you just follow the thread of that. And it's just very different to how me or Phil would write, but it adds to the flavor. And as a band that have always admired a band like Queen, we see a thread there where it's like, well, you know, Freddie Mercury wrote a certain way and Roger Taylor wrote a certain way and Brian May and John Deacon wrote a certain way, but they all could write songs that would represent Queen, and they all had hit singles as individual writers. So it all comes under the banner of Queen. And lyrically, I think we've just got to that point now where it's comfortable to put ideas forward. But when we're actually doing that, especially as we've, for the most part, in the last 2 albums, we've been writing individually and presenting songs to each other, except for me and Phil wrote quite a few bits together. But even then, it was, he would send me a chorus. Maybe he spent a week writing it. And then there's just a big hole where the verse and bridge are. And I might spend a week before I send it back to him. It certainly wouldn't be 40 minutes because I want to honor what he's done, because this is great. I'm not going to write something that's inferior. It's got to be at least as good.
Right.
Otherwise, it's going to be obvious that no effort went in, you know.
It's funny you say that about the Queen thing. I've always thought that too, that you wouldn't necessarily know who wrote it. Afterwards, it was always kind of like, oh, I didn't realize that. I would have assumed Freddie wrote it or something. And then you see John Deacon wrote it. And as I was going through, you were talking about Diamond Star Halos, I was going through it this last few days, doing the same thing, like going through all the credits, going, okay, who wrote what? Same thing. I was like, oh, that's Phil by himself, or that's Joe, but I wouldn't necessarily know that it has that common thread. So it's funny you say that, and I was curious about that because when you're not, you know, when you have to, and it's a lot of songs on that album. There's 15 songs, I think, and to still be creating, by the way, which is kind of amazing at this point, to still have that drive to write and create and not just rest on like, well, we did this, you know, and we had these hits and stuff. That in and of itself is an achievement. But how do you then decide what's the process of this one's going to be on the album? Because I'm guessing you wrote more than than is actually on the album. But how do you come to that and decide, no, this feels good? Is it a lot of like, since you're singing it, Joe, do you have to feel like, no, I have to be able to sing this if it's not your song, et cetera? But how do you narrow those down? How do you make those decisions?
We don't have a tons of songs to then choose. We actually, when we got to 15, we stopped. We actually had actually this album was a rare one because we were still writing. We just run out of time. It's like, oh, we better use these 15. But so we don't have that thing that other bands do. But the whole writing process, you know, like Joe said, we've got so much better at it. So at this stage of the game, it's like, why wouldn't you use all that experience? It's a bit like the live performance thing. We're a better band than we've ever been. And I kind of maintain, I think the best gig we've ever done in our career, well, there's been a few of them in the last year. We played SoFi Stadium in LA, which is like, you normally go, oh, yeah, LA's loads of people, it's such a pain, all this stuff. It was amazing because it was towards the end of the tour. Everyone's vocals were ridiculous. You know, Joe's was like spectacular. The playing, I could play stuff that I couldn't play at the beginning of the tour. And us as a band and as performers and an artist presenting our stuff, we'd never been that good. So you got this energy. You know, there was people in the audience. There's like John Mayer. There was like, you know, people freaking out. You know, Tom Morello, Rage Against the Machine. You'd see them like banging their heads and, you know, doing all this. It's like, wow, this is bizarre. And I think the same thing with songwriting. You know, we've got so much better at it. And why wouldn't you take advantage of that? You know, just most bands or artists, they kind of slow down or they do this thing. No, with us, we got more inspired and we've got better at it. So as artists, as performers, as everything, it's such a brilliant place to be because, you know, we couldn't have done this when we were younger.
It's funny you say that. My niece is in her 20s, right? And she saw you guys in Philly and she's sending me the video of it. And I'm like, and I looked and that was the thing that struck me was in the crowd. I said, man, you know, this looks like it's, you know, like when I was that age, you know, but there's still, it's not just people my age, right? It's all of a sudden like it's people like her and her friends. And that was so impressive to me and they know the songs and they're singing, and that for you guys, it's got to be a kick.
Well, thank you. But I mean, we're really badass. I mean, I kind of, we've spent years, we after that gig at SoFi, we had a show the next day. Joe warmed up for 8 hours, vocal warm-ups. So I don't know other bands that do that. You know, opera singers do that, Broadway artists do that. That's real performers, and that's who we are now. So you know, it's like it is badass. You know, I hear the stuff. I hear the tapes back. You know, after tapes, I hear the video back after the show, and it's insane. We've got to this level, and yeah, we're really badass and we're really proud of it. So I'm not surprised people have that reaction. All the vocals are real. You know, again, this is a current thing. Lots of artists, you know, these are Pro Tools session or whatever. All of our stuff is real and it's out there. So it kind of makes a difference there as well, I think.
I've always wanted to ask you this. Didn't think I'd ever get a chance, but here we are. The backing vocals of Def Leppard are amazing. There's something that is so rich and thick about the way they've sounded. It's such a part of the records. Other than being singers who can sing, I know that's part of it. But how was the approach to getting that sound? That what to me is always that's that Def Leppard sound. When I hear it, I go like, oh, there it is. And so you know, like we're talking about Love Bites is an example. These very high parts and stuff like that. So who's singing those? You know, I can hear Joe doing it. Sometimes I hear his voice, but it's the band too. Who was singing those, and how was your approach to getting that? What I would only call the Def Leppard sound, getting that the way it was.
Well, the extremely high stuff on the records that most people are aware of is mostly me and Mutt. We could more him than me, maybe, but we would be the two people in the room that could hit notes that high. And then the midsection would be Mutt again. Mutt basically would shadow everybody's voice. He's a fantastic singer. So he'd just be part of the gang. We would all stand around the microphone and say, for example, if it's a Gods of War, I don't think there's a harmony on Gods of War, or it's just a drone harmony. It's not a vocal 3-part like, say, Armageddon it was. We'd all stand around in a circle and just bark it out like dogs, you know, but we'd multi-track. We were learned that, you know, Queen used to multi-track. When Queen did their backing vocals, all three singers sang the same part. So that every harmony had all three singers on it. It wasn't Fred did one, Roger did the high one, and say Brian did the middle one. They all did the high one. They all did the middle one. They all did the low one. And we kind of did that, but whereas they only might have done 4 or 5 passes, we did like 24 passes and bounced them all down into pairs and into. So when you get one side of the stereo done for Rock of Ages, you do it all again and bounce them all down to the left side. So you've got maybe a 240 voices doing just the one harmony, and then you do it all again. So certain songs we would just all sing exactly the same thing. And then when it gets to the more intricate parts or specialist parts, whoever had the right voice for it would do it. So like say on Too Late for Love, there was a harmony he needed doing on the end of the last verse. And it turns out that the best person to do it was Phil, and he just kind of joined the band. And that's when we discovered that me and him have got a really good blend. And say on Animal, the bridge part on Animal, on the record, I sang the melody, and I think me and Mutt, maybe Sav, did the high harmony. But when it comes to doing it live, Phil sings the melody, and I take the high harmony because it just suits both our voices better live to do that. He wouldn't hit the high ones as easily as me, and I wouldn't hit the low ones as easy as him. So it would swap. It's easy. It doesn't matter. I sing the high stuff on Bring on the Heartbreak live, which Mutt did on the record mostly. Well, me and him a little bit, but that one was the first record we ever did, first song we ever did with multiple massive backing vocals, because it was the only ballad on High and Dry, if you like, that deserved the treatment that's singing rather than barking. But we're really good at doing all of it. You know, we don't sing it the way that other rock bands do. We kind of sing. We don't do the sweet stuff. I don't mean the band sweet. I mean sweet harmonies that maybe a Kansas or REO or Styx do. We fall off the words like Jagger or like David Johansen, like Alice Cooper. So it's all about attitude more than exact performance. It's never been our thing to have it so that the melody is more important than the actual performance of the vocal. So you can isolate our stuff and say, well, that is really good singing. But if you actually listen, it's got character to it that's more like a lead vocal times 3 different harmonies. It's not strict and regimented like a lot of people would think. May come across that way, but it seriously wasn't. Mutt would be the first to say, oh, stop singing like a pussy, you know, and then we'd bark them out, you know, and we'd by multi-tracking it loads and loads and loads of times. It kind of tightened them up and then loosened them up at the same time, but it more importantly gave them size. And that's what we wanted them to have, was size and attitude. And the melodies were obvious because we'd written the songs as melodic pop rock songs. So there were always going to be a melody there, but we didn't sing it like choir boys. We really barked them out more like the Stones would, you know.
Slade. I was listening to Slade.
Yeah, Slade, you know. Yeah. Sweet was another great example. They had really great harmonies, but when they did the really high stuff, it wasn't falsetto. It was screeching high like Roger Taylor could do on early Queen records. And it's an attitude that it's a gift. You can't really work with it. I have it purely because I have no option. To get that high, I have to belt it out. And that gives it a sound that most singers will go, I'm not doing that. And I'm like, okay, I don't mind doing it because it gives it something that nobody else will have because they can't be bothered to try. So, you know, I mean, it's taxing on the vocal cords. And there's no doubt in the past I've suffered for it, you know, especially on a long tour where you're belting them out and you're doing 6 shows a week. You will get to that point where people are going, he can't sing anymore, you know, but it's nothing to do with that. It's the scheduling being as crap as it was. Once we said, no more, not doing that anymore. I'm not doing 6 shows a week. And you get a chance to rest up. The older you get, the more you need to rest. But in the studio, we don't care because it's like, I'm losing my voice. Okay, let's just knock you on the head tonight. We'll pick it up tomorrow. You sleep on it, you come back, your voice has come back. If it hasn't, you wait another day. You know, and so the record is the only chance you ever get to get it exactly how you hear it in your head. And then you can adapt it live. There's so many things that people think, you know, when they hear us, we know that there's massive amounts of what's on the song missing because we can't play 11 guitars or 1,000 vocals, but you represent what the record was. and it sounds fine, you know.
Tell me about writing too. When you start writing a song, there's so many of your songs have very strong titles. And again, it's just a feeling that like sometimes these titles are first, and then because they're so strong, Rock of Ages, but something like Pour Some Sugar on Me. I got to know, how does that come about? Is that an idea that starts first, or is it sort of like some of that riffy kind of vocal things that turn into? I'm curious about the process of that, and also on the album, the new album, the arrangement of that. Talk about different. We're in a whole different place here with a guest vocalist, etc. So, if you could, a little bit about the process of what you remember writing about that, and then how it evolves to where it is on this album that's out now.
Well, Sugar and Rock of Ages are two great examples there. We had the backing track for Rock of Ages for ages, and we couldn't come up with a chorus. Yeah. I think we had we had melody, and it was just Cab Calloway for weeks and weeks and weeks. And then one day we were in the studio in London, and we were asked if we wouldn't mind the local Willesden Tabernacle Choir coming in to record some stuff, right? And so we said, fine, as long as they don't touch anything, let them do it. And as it turns out, they did touch things. They moved the guitar mics, because I remember Mike Shipley, our engineer, having an absolute meltdown because they had. But it didn't matter in the end of the day, because in the big history of things, they left a hymn book behind on the couch in this control room. And if my memory serves me right, this might be urban myth, but I was there, so I don't remember necessarily as accurately as I'd like to think. But it was open to the hymn Rock of Ages, or I opened it and saw it, one of the two, and I just started singing Rock of Ages in that space where we were going dead and dead. And I just remember Mutt turning around from the desk and going, "Oh yeah, yes." So that's how that one came. It was after the fact. We'd written a space for a killer phrase that we just couldn't come up with. With Pour Some Sugar on Me, there was only me and Mutt possibly in the country. We were in Holland, certainly in the studio or in the city. Everybody else had gone away for a couple of days, and we was doing a vocal on a different song when we took a tea break, coffee break. And I just sat in the control room and picked up an acoustic guitar and started playing the chorus of this song. And Mutt came back into the room and just asked me what it was. Now, I've often said that I genuinely think he thought I was just goofing off some Kinks or Who song or something. But I said, it's just this hook that I'd been messing with. And he says, play it again. So I did, and it was the chorus of Sugar. And he went, oh my God. He says, that's one of the best hooks I've heard for many a year. Play it again. So I did. He stops what we're doing, takes the multi-tracks off. I think it might have been Armageddon it. Puts a fresh reel of tape on, and he just says, keep playing those chords. And he just quickly programs a drum machine. And I'm like, what are you doing? He goes, we got to do this. And I'm going, they'll go, no, 2.5 years we've been working on these 11 songs. They're going to go mental if we go another song. And he goes, no, we'll do it really quick. So he bangs out a drum machine, puts a machine bass on it. He puts some electric guitars down on the chorus. And then me and him just started singing the chorus, multi-tracking it up as a demo. And then we just waited until these guys came back and said, good news and bad news. And long story short, they played it round. Everybody went, fine, okay, we'll do it. Phil came up with a killer riff in the verse. We had a melody for the verse that was a little bit more like Come Together by the Beatles, kind of like a halftime to what it is now. And then it just kind of sounded draggy. So as it was a slow-paced tune, we doubled up the melody, kind of inspired by rap or Run DMC, Aerosmith, whatever was happening in 87. And so we doubled up the melody from whatever it was to and it just gave it more of a galloping rhythm, So that was a great example of, we did have the chorus. And in fact, if we hadn't have had the chorus, nobody else would have been interested in doing the song, probably. But they came in, Phil mostly came in and put all those, that killer riff down in the verse. And then we just started working on the lyrics. And that in itself was a completely unique thing as far as I'm aware. We all had those little dictaphone things back in those days, and you'd just so you wouldn't forget stuff, you know. So me and Mutt went into opposite ends of the control room with the big speakers on, playing the song through whatever we had of it, and we were just scatting again like Cab Calloway. We didn't have lyrics. We just and then we swapped tapes and we tried to decipher what we thought the other person had been singing. And one of the first line that we got was, "Come, love is like a bomb, baby, come and get it on." And straight away it was like, it's Mark Bolan. So that set the precedent for how that lyric was going to go. It was going to be, we weren't going to try and write "The Streets Have No Name" with this. It was going to be like "Satisfaction." It was going to be like "Start Me Up." It was going to be like a T-Rex track where it's phonetically friendly lyrics rather than over a great subject matter. But once we had that first line, it just felt like a house of cards. And it was the quickest thing that we did on Hysteria. I think we had the majority of that song was done in about 10 days. If we could have done the entire album in 10 days, we'd have been in the studio for a little over 4 months, you know, rather than 2.5 years. But, you know, we rewrote and we re-recorded and we scrapped and we started again. But with Sugar, because it came right at the very end, it had to be what it was. So it had a natural energy that the other songs never had, because there was always, I'll do it tomorrow. We got to do it now or never, you know, and it turned out to be an extremely important song.
And little did you know, Tom Cruise would sing it years later. That in and of itself.
And we were there when he did it.
Is that right?
Yeah. We just did a gig in somewhere in Florida, and we were driving past Fort Lauderdale to the next gig, and they were in a club filming, and they said, "Oh, you know," their production people were talking to our management, and they said, "Oh, we're filming if you want to come down and watch it." And literally we got there, and 10 minutes later they were doing Sugar on stage. Crazy.
Now, when you get to the new arrangement, Phil, no big guitars, right? Kind of your riff comes out of this.
No guitars at all, actually. So again, you know, when the criteria for the Drastic Symphonies album was, let's do an arrangement. So we got Eric Gorfan, who's actually worked on Diamond Star Halos, worked on Down and Outs, worked on a Tesla album that I produced, worked with Vivian. So he's our guy, he's our string guy, I feel like. He's part of the band. He would demo ideas for some of these songs. And most of the time, it was black or white. It was like, that works, that absolutely doesn't. And the criteria is that you can't ruin our songs. Going back to us being precious and everything. And this sounds ridiculous. It sounds pompous if you're going to have the strings doing that. Porcelain Sugar was one of them. It was like, you can't play that riff dum, 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 on cellos. It sounds ridiculous and really pompous. And we're like, no. So we go with a lot of the songs. It was like, yes for that one. No. Let's get rocked, ridiculous, Rock of Ages, stupid, you know, Porcelain Sugar Me, absolutely not. So the label are like, this is your biggest song. We really like if you could do this. And it's like, well, this ain't going to happen in this format. So Rick Savage goes, yeah, what about that version that M. Griner did? We have this friend, M. Griner, Joe, we all met her years ago, but he got this tape of this girl singing a piano version of Porcelain Sugar, and we all like, wow, this is great. And she's awesome. And Sav said, well, why don't we do that? Joe phones M up, says, we're doing this thing. You know, we're doing this later on, but that version, it would be great on here. It actually works a treat. So that's what we did. And piano, vocals, and strings, it works beautifully. So no, it's the song is king. It's always about that. It's not about who plays what, who sings what, who does what. If you know, written a song and it's brilliant in another format, you're proud of it. It's actually even cooler to hear your song done in a different way, and this worked out beautifully.
Yeah, you're right. Though, if the vocal or the melody and the lyric is there, you know, the arrangements can be done a lot. I mean, the arrangement can ruin a song too, but if the melody and lyric are great,
absolutely it can.
Yeah,
I think the great thing about this band, and it does allude to why we're still here with such enthusiasm and drive to keep going, is that it's relatively ego free. This this unit that we work within, and everybody does realize that the song is king, you know. And it makes you think back to, say, like Yesterday by the Beatles, where in actual fact it's not by the Beatles at all, it's just Paul McCartney, you know, and a string arrangement. And you wonder, did Ringo, George and John go, ugh, can't get my licks in on this one, or they go, you know what, it's fine, you know. And that's how we've always thought about songs. We've been alluding to Switch 625, where when we wrote that song, and said, well, you know, lyrics and melody, I'm not singing on this. This is an instrumental. I don't need to be on it, you know. So we're all, you know, very flexible in a sense of it. You listen to the thing and you imagine it in your head, and you go like, it doesn't need me on it, you know. It doesn't need that, or I'm okay taking my parts off to let the orchestra do their thing. There was no fighting about this. Nobody went, oh, you know, I'm going to sue if you take my licks off. I mean, seriously, there are some musicians out there that would do that, you know. Sure. But to us, it's just funny that people are that dumb and blind to improving what they've got, or giving it a breath of fresh air by changing things up. But M's version been knocking around for years, and as Phil says, when Sav suggested we use M's version, it was a case of like, we did it, she played it, I did it as a duet with her, so there was, at least my voice was on. But we probably did listen to it and go, you know what, I could just put some strummy acoustics on here, but why? Doesn't need them. And that's the great thing about this band, is the recognizing of when not to do things. As me and Phil are huge fans of Mick Ronson, and everybody's always said that knows anything about a guitar that one of the greatest attributes that Ronson had was when not to play. He'd leave a huge hole in the middle of Moon Age Daydream and then just hit one note for two minutes, you know. And it worked a treat, you know, because he wasn't like, it's not the more you play, the better you are. Sometimes leaving things out makes something better. And you don't, this new version of Sugar doesn't need the clutter. Some of the songs did, but this particular
gratuitous, you know, we avoid gratuitous, and it's like there was another song that's like Hysteria, that when it gets to the guitar solo, the strings do the guitar solo, and it's like, it's such an honor to have the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra playing your stuff, you know what I mean? It's like, yes, this is great. We're fans of our own music and we don't want it messed up, but if it's enhanced by anyone, it's like, yeah, bring it on. It's like, I don't get it. I don't know why everyone wouldn't be like this. It's like, it's just wonderful. It's like we get to be fans of our own music as well. It's great.
Well, what you wouldn't have liked is 14-year-old Mark, first song I ever played with a band in a garage, Hand of God's Rock of Ages. Terrible. Just absolutely. We murdered your song. I'm going to let you know. But for me, it's just an honor to talk to you guys, because it's such a part of my history as a musician. And so thank you, first of all, for all the music. Thank you for doing this. Congratulations on the new album. It is fantastic, and people should definitely check it out. When you hear, again, sonically, hearing new things, hearing it feels bigger and wider in a lot of ways, and again, as big as the original records still feel. So it's definitely worth a listen. So congratulations on that, and thank you again both for everything and for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you everybody for watching this episode of Behind the Songs. We will see you again next time, and until then, as always, we encourage you to make music and make a difference, and we will see you again next time.